So I'm really happy and fortunate to have the privilege to present the next session. One of the few things that this conference is delivering as a hands-on tool, which is really trailblazing the way that we look at gender issues and women's leadership. Next up is a presentation and discussion, conversations around the Women's World Atlas. And once again, I would like to welcome Silvana Koch-Merin, who is the founder and president of WPL.
Thank you. And it's very hard to follow that inspirational message and strong words from Felicia. But I think it all builds up on each other about what's the place of the woman in the world and how do we demand it and how do we get there. And the Women's World Atlas is looking at different areas where there's still quite some room for action. I'll present those maps in a while, but first I'd like to ask our fantastic panelists to come here on stage, and that's Donatille Mukabalisa, the Speaker of Parliament in Rwanda. Please come here. Then Sophie Wilmès, who is the Minister of Budget in Belgium. And Pearlie Chan, who is Chief of Staff, member of the boardroom of HTC, one of the cutting-edge IT companies. I'll also sit down. I was assured that this thing works from whichever corner of the stage. So, Women's World Atlas, what could that possibly be? Well, we always talk about what are the percentages of women in X, Y, and Z, and which countries did get where with that. We all have seen this list and statistics, and so the data, which has been kindly put together by Oxford Analytica and then put into those world maps by Capacent, our partners in this project, we just thought, let's visualize this in a way where it just shows something is wrong on this world map. So you will see, and we start with politics, we will see the map of countries that have achieved parity in politics, because 50% of people are women, so you'd think the representatives are 50% as well. And on this map, oh, I have to press that button now, yes, right, yeah. On this map, it's quite an empty map, right? So I've got 3 countries left on it: Rwanda, Cuba, and Bolivia. They have 50% in their representatives being women. 50% of population is women. Something is really wrong on this world map. Then you think, okay, let's go to 30%. We get a bit better, but still, it's quite a lot of countries missing. If you ask the head of states or government of these countries, they say, no, actually, I want my country to be there. We say, qualify yourself, get to 30 or 50. Next year, you're on that map. Then we move to business. Which countries have parity with their CEOs, not board membership, CEOs in stock exchange listed companies? Very, very empty map, right? So this is the big blue ocean taking over the world, Thailand and Cambodia, the countries having 50%, 30%. Again, it remains sad. A few more countries adding to this world map, but that's the countries that have 30% women in CEO positions, and a lot of possible action happening to get to parity or to 30%. Then we move to the pipeline. So, which countries have parity in university education? Well, this map looks entirely different, doesn't it? So you can see the education gap isn't exactly the thing, and this is. If you look to 30%, the map gets even fuller. Now, US still hasn't featured on any of the maps if somebody took notice, but still, we're almost there, right? Then we go to 50% of women in IT and communication education. There we see a slight backdrop, right? Which countries have parity? It's way too few. 30%, again, a bit better, but a blunt and big absence of the so-called global north. interesting, right? That women in North America, Europe, Russia, Japan aren't exactly not even at the 30%. So this is visualizing data that we've all heard of, all have seen, as I said, in lists of figures, but I find this put on a world map to say only countries get a place on that map where parity or 30% is there, then they deserve to be displayed, a powerful visual tool. And we will have this going on in slides, right? So I put this thing away. Thank you, technology people. And I just wanted to discuss with my super distinguished and knowledgeable panel here, what can we do to really get to action? Because we've heard over lunch, we don't want to justify why we need action, okay? It's just the right of women to be there at 50%. And we've got here the global champion, Rwanda, more than 60% of women parliaments. I think extra applause for this country. Belgium, not so bad in European comparison, also smaller applause maybe.
Big applause.
And HTC, I mean, you were kind of trailblazer, you told me, in smartphones, now with virtual reality, so really kind of cutting edge, very much out there for futuristic thing. You've got 2 women in the boardroom, and your CEO is a woman, so also very unusual. But maybe we start with Donatil, if I can ask you. You coming from a country which has, in the past parliaments, had this really high number of women in parliament, but also 50-50 in government. What's your advice to other countries, like the many that don't have 50-50 in the world? What to do? How to get there?
First of all, I'd like to say how we've got there. So it is something like exchanging our experience, so they can maybe get inspired by our country, how we got there. When I am talking about my country, Rwanda, I can talk about my country if I don't go to the background of our history. You all know that it's a country that went through the most horrific genocide against Tutsi. When the genocide was stopped, the country was totally destroyed. So the rebirth of our country, we are considering that we resuscitated since 1994. Even during the struggle to liberate our country, women have played a very big role politically and militarily. When the genocide was stopped, the majority of the survivors of the genocide were women, 75% of the survivors. So they were obliged to contribute to rebuilding our country. They have played a big role in the struggle, in the rebuilding of our country, in the process of healing, because the country was totally destroyed, with the population traumatized. So they were obliged to take that leading role in the healing process, in the unity and reconciliation process, in rebuilding the country that was totally destroyed. Nothing was existent. So they played a very, very big role. So they have demonstrated their capabilities and their abilities, because they were obliged to do even tasks that was traditionally reserved for men. So they have obliged to build their houses because they had no shelter. We have no other choice except to build our country. So we had many factors that allowed our country to get where we are now.
So the crisis, in a way, was an opportunity for women to prove themselves and then to step up from there. If I can come back to that in a little while and just move on to another political example, because in Belgium there is a quota system for putting up candidates for parliament, right? what's the experience with that? Why did, I mean...
So first of all, when I react about
Yes.
the experience that just has been shared, we see that unfortunately in the history of women's rights, after wars, because men were disappearing and women had gained their right to be part of the society, which is politically or just part of society. We saw that in Europe as well. Fortunately, in Europe, we have not experienced war for a long time, and therefore, when we have to go forwards with women's right to be in a political area, we see that if we let the evolution just go, it doesn't work. So it's true that we have decided, first of all, in 2002, to say at least the number of candidates should be equally male and female, and it have brought up results. But at that time, we realized as well that if we just put that obligation on board, women would not get the best places on the list because, you know, in a big list of candidates, you can put all the men on the top, all the men under, where it's very visible place, and the woman, what we call in the soft belly of the place. And therefore, what we have decided in a few regions of Belgium, which is Wallonia and Brussels, is that now not only we need to pair the gender on the list, but we have to make it men, woman, or woman, man, etc., to be sure that women get their equal share of opportunity. And what we see is that there is a huge improvement in the number of seats that we have, but it's only 30% in the federal parliament. And maybe there is something because an insight. We are all here women, not only women, but mostly women. And it strikes me that if women were more trusting other women to do the job, there would not be such a problem of representation as far as the lists are equally paired. And maybe it's a call, and I'm sure I don't need to convince the women here that they have to trust other women because they made the choice to come here. But maybe it's something we have to spread around when we are back in our different countries.
Yeah, well, we saw yesterday the Reykjavik index of how societies, men and women, feel about women in leadership. And in most countries, apart from Germany, where there is a big difference between women and men, the perception is very close, meaning that there isn't, well, we still have a lot of work to do to say for society to overcome the stereotyping that certain positions are better held by one or the other gender. But Sophie, if I may, yes, you have this all in place, numbers go up, but the real positions of power, the core portfolios in the government, it's a boys' club, right? There's
Absolutely.
No woman in there.
So what happened is that, first of all, you have to have the elected seats. We see that 30%, okay, it's good, it's better than before, but it doesn't represent the society in its all. And after that, there is a co-option. The moment that we decided who's going to become a minister, it's a co-option process. And there we see indeed in Belgium that men have the major seats. So I'm not going to complain about the fact that here I am a woman, I'm having the budget in my hands,
which is a big deal.
Is supposedly a main job, and it's true that, for example, the first time was really, really weird. The first time we presented me as the next budget minister, I was already a politician for 15 years, but not really acquainted with the media. And the first question I got asked, and I'm not kidding, was like, "Oh, a woman in the budget. Please react." And I was so astonished about the question. I realized that this person was didn't meant bad, but that the whole society was surprised to have a woman at probably at that seat. Yeah. So there is also with my friends, my media and my political friends and colleagues room for improvement as well when it's about co-opted colleague female at the most higher post of government.
That's why we chose actually to display the elected parliamentarians where that's not co-opted. And Pearlie, before I come to you, I'd like to go back to this amazing example of Rwanda, because the members of government are appointed by the president. And while for parliament there is a 30% quota, which is, as you're more than 60% women parliamentarians, more than met, like 30% quota, but 60% elected. But the government is 50-50 as well. There is no obligation, let's say, legally that way. Well, why don't all countries do that?
First of all, we have put in place a policy and a legal framework that allow to have equality and equity. Starting with the constitution that is providing for equality between all Rwandans and especially equal rights between men and women, and a quota of at least 30%. In 30% of women position in decision-making organs. So in all laws, in different public institutions, even in private institutions, this quota is mandatory of at least 30%. In the organic law governing political parties and politicians, this quota is also mandatory. And in making decision organs of political parties, it is mandatory to have at least 30% of women. So there is also a mechanism to oversee if those quota are respected. It is the Senate who is going to see if those quota are respected. And while, first of all, our Chamber of Deputies is composed of 80 members. 24 seats are special seats for women. So they are elected by other women and other representatives of the population. We have 53, that is for political parties and independent candidates. When making the list, the electoral list, it is mandatory to align women and men and to respect at least 30% from the top. So among the 10 top on the political party list, it is mandatory to have at least 30% of women. If on the top of the list there is a woman, you have to align men or women. If there is a man on the top of the list, you have to align women, so to have at least 30% on the political parties.
And so, if I may, we don't want to justify, but if I can say, Rwanda is the African country with one of the highest growth rates, with the highest stability, the lowest corruption, and a lot of international observers say it does have a clear correlation with the advancement and the power positions that are held by women and the bigger diversity that's there. And you're one of the very few women speakers of parliament on the globe. If we draw up the map of countries having a woman speaker of parliament, it's, I think, as small as the one with women CEOs. But let me first, because we want to hear the voice of a tech company, of a very kind of senior member of a tech company, and you're kind of double minority, if I can say. You're Asian background, you're IT, but not just any IT mainstream, but the one that's kind of on the forefront. So I asked you before coming up here, I don't want to hear any more kind of complaining, this is terrible, the situation, but kind of, you're an optimist, you're young, you're driving cutting edge. So what to do to fix that problem?
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here. Looking at the map, it really sort of brought me back in time. I sort of travel in time machine back to my childhood aspirations when before having a dream of becoming an astronaut or a paleontologist, my first dream was to become the first woman president of Taiwan. And for some reason, along the way, for myriad of reasons, that record has been taken now, so I will no longer be the first woman president if I one day run for office. But for a myriad reason, that dream was deemed infeasible. And then I went on, I did really well in middle school. So I was placed in this prodigy class of science and math. So I was like, sure, let's explore a different math if I couldn't be the first woman president, for any reason that was instilled in my mind. And then I was one of 3 girls in the class of 40, prodigy for science and math. That was highly uncomfortable. It didn't feel like the courses materials were prepared for me. It didn't feel like I belonged. All the boys were doing homework together, and I really didn't feel like I was in the right place. So I quickly followed the societal expectation of me to go pursue a career in finance, business, and management. And then I started my career with Goldman Sachs, investment money in Hong Kong, a very fast-paced environment. There I was often told, why are you so aggressive? Believe it or not, even in an environment like Goldman Sachs. So again, it really felt like a male-dominated environment where women don't necessarily belong. And then when I had this sort of moment of looking for the right inspiration to move forward in exploring different paths, that's where Cher found me. Cher is the CEO, founder, chairwoman, one of the very few tech leaders in the world building cutting-edge technologies, pioneering smartphones down virtual augmented reality and 5G, edge computing, AI. It's incredibly inspiring to have been able to join her in that journey and shifting paradigms, computer paradigms, human technology interface. And she didn't come from technology engineering background. She was a music, economic major, but she always believed in me. The day I joined her, she was invited by the president of Taiwan, a man at that time, to speak at a high-profile event. She said, Pearlie will speak for me. I was barely 25. I was super young and inexperienced. I always suffered from the imposter syndrome, which I believe a lot of us still experience today, even at Cher's level. But I one step at a time, I was convinced that if we keep believing and keep exploring and flexing that muscle of reinventing ourselves and being wherever that we have an opportunity to speak up, stand up for ourselves, represent, inspire those that came after us, then there's an opportunity to keep staying on that journey, feeling inspired. So hence, in this technology world, where again, she and I are often the only women in the room, especially when we represented Taiwan in APAC context and political context or global business context with other CEOs or political leaders, there are really more women than us in the room.
But Pearlie, do you need to build some sort of cutting-edge virtual intelligence, AI, whatever, your terminology, not mine, method to get the kind of parity in the job that you're doing? How to fix it? You're a fixer. I mean, you solve problems with what you do there.
I think that the reason I was sharing my journey was because a lot of soft problems exist in the way that a lot of us recognize it, but we need to go beyond and address them by embodying those examples and recognizing those examples and embodying them into systems. I don't feel like we have the perfect answers today. We know a lot of problems and what the solutions are, but why is it that progress is not catching up as fast as we would like to see? I don't believe it's a technology problem either, but I am hopeful that because of technology in the age of AI, leadership can be redefined in many different ways that incorporates more soft power, more empathy and compassion, a lot of ways that women are intrinsically more capable in. And so as that will be incorporated as we develop in
the Women's World Atlas clearly shows it's not necessarily an education issue anymore because women are well educated and increasingly so. So this education paradigm has been really incorporated. Women know and want education. They know they need education, they want education.
And they already earn more than half of the degrees.
Exactly, in many of the kind of really top degrees, it's more women than men. So that's dealt with. The pipeline is there. Still, there is this kind of, some people say it's not a glass ceiling, but a thick layer of men. That's Laura Liswood, the chair of the Secretary General of the Council of Women World Leaders. She calls it a thick layer of men, which blocks women to go up. So because, unfortunately, we don't have that much time, I want the kind of one thing from your area of expertise. What's one element to fix it? Not the magic wand. We're not magicians here, but we want to have concrete, actionable things. So what is it?
As far as politics is concerned, it's a mandatory amount of women on the leadership position. I'm sorry, I'm a liberal, so it's very hard for me to speak about quotas until I figured out that it's never going to be natural or magical. And the only way to do it is to be compulsory. And it should be a temporary measure. But I see that every time we put something compulsory on the map, we are moving forward. And when the compulsory, the obligation stops, this is where we stop as well. Therefore, it proves that we need to go forward in the obligation of putting women in power, in the real center of power. It should be 30%, and we shall raise 50%, and then we will be able to drop those quotas. And you know, you say you don't need to justify, but then we will not justify why we need to be there as well. We will just have a statement and say, see, you know, and that would be nice as well.
Thank you. So it's quotas, mandatory, parity until it's normal, then we remove the quotas.
Absolutely.
Right. Donatil.
Yeah, quotas are necessary for at the beginning, but maybe we will be, as we have put in place different policies and programs that allowing women to raise their skills and abilities and capabilities. Maybe we will arrive at a time we will remove those quotas. But for the time being, I think quotas are necessary. And I would like also to take this opportunity to share another experience of our country. Two things. First of all, we have the political will from the highest level of our leadership. That has created confidence in women in order to be able to present their candidacy for election or to be able to even to make studies, young girls. We see young girls in different areas that were male-dominated, such as we see pilots, we see engineers, we see so whatever. So we have also in our country developed partnership with men to remove those stereotypes. So we have in our country something that is unique. We have an association of men, only men, called Rwamrek. It is Rwanda Men's Resource Center. It is an association of men that are fighting against gender-based violence. That they are,
great.
They are also dealing with gender-related issues using the men-engaged approach. It was created just to make sure, to ensure that gender aspect, gender issues are well understood by every citizen, women and men, boys and girls.
Yeah.
So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. We are so unfortunately out of time. So
I'll be short, very short.
Super efficient short.
Coming from the private sector, it's about investment. Women get 2% of VC funding around the world. We know that. It's about investing. I'm investing in companies myself. I strive to invest in more women. And that's where change will happen as well, setting more examples and getting them more successful. Investing economically, but also in their career. Sometimes it takes a little risk to sort of get outside of your comfort zone and thinking who's more qualified. Maybe the pipeline issue still exists somewhat, but investing, taking a risk on women that are promising is also extremely important. I'm a beneficiary of that. So I think investing women by money, by taking a risk on them, both extremely important.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think these are very, very good takeaways from this session. And we all have a mission now, investing and changing laws, introducing quotas.